What's up, guys? Barry Gaming here, back with some more Idle Heroes, and today to follow up with our overall ultimate tier list, I wanted to take our data set, kind of pick the heroes that we want to be looking at, because today we want to look at the top first E5 heroes to potentially build on your account. Now, these first E5 heroes are also great second, third, fourth, and fifth, essentially wanting to build one of each of these in every single faction until you can get all of your C-Land 20s done. So even if you don't pick one of the heroes on this list, you can always use any of these in your following hero builds, because that's pretty much what we're trying to do on the optimal free-to-play series. We're trying to pick as many heroes in this list to use in the early game, but then transition slowly in the late game. So we're going to have early game score, we're going to have the late game score, and we're going to have their overall usefulness on your account throughout the game. So as far as the way these are sorted, these are purely sorted from data points. I wouldn't take this as like a 100% these are like the order they're in, because let's be honest, the way the data puts it based on our rankings, it puts Tix as the third best one. I honestly would probably bump him out of the top 5 or 6 heroes, to be honest. This list is very interesting. I wanted to do it based on the data numbers we've given them for rankings, and then we can kind of show you the overall score that they have, the late game score, all that fun stuff. So let's jump right into it. Hopefully you guys enjoy this one. Let's get going. So on this one here, I don't think I'm going to give you guys an actual direct link to the tier list, because I want to talk about each hero at least a little bit and describe what's going on. If I had my option and I was just manually placing heroes in a tier list, there would be some definite changes. Number one, I still believe I'd put Eloise at the top of this list instead of Holmes. I would bump Tix down quite a bit and maybe have Waldeck a little bit higher. But again, these are based on our data points that we put in for Aspen Dungeon, Tower, Tower Dreams, all those different game modes. And this is what it's come up with. If you look on the kind of right-hand side here, we have early mid-game column that's purple, followed by late game, followed by overall. If I was you, I would want to try to pick your first E5 to be one of the ones that has the highest early and mid-game score plus overall score. So number one here, we have Holmes Young. Absolutely crushing C-Land 20. Probably the second best solo C-Land 20 hero in this list, but like behind Eloise, and it's just, Eloise is just untouchable. She's by far the easiest to get C-Land 20 done. It's absolutely crazy, but he has a lot more uses overall. He can do, of course, you know, he's good in Realms Gate, Tower Dreams, all the same places she is. The only difference is that he will be better in PvP overall. That's the one big bonus he has compared to her. And of course, he will do better damage, I believe, in boss fights too. I might have been a little too rough on Eloise's boss fight damage, because the one thing to note with her is in the early game she does pretty good because she can stay alive, which means higher damage numbers, whereas other heroes might die before the end of the fight and not put out as much damage. I'd say the boss fight number might have been leaning a little more heavily towards the end game. And even at that, Holmes Young isn't that great. But either one of those two are absolutely amazing. You can kind of see their overall score. They're right there with you. Eloise is probably a little bit better in the early game, whereas Holmes Young is a little bit better in the late game. They're both tenants for Transcendence heroes. Eloise is basically a Transcendence hero in herself. So definitely pick one of those two if you want like the most optimal route to go. If you want progression, hero copies come very easily, as you guys have seen on the free-to-play account, so you can kind of pick whatever you want. After that, it's ranking Tix at third, but you'll notice in his scoring, his mid-early game score is very high, but then his late game is extremely low. He is a Transcendence tenant, but most of the things he's good for is C-Land, Tower of Oblivion, and Aspen Dungeon. Beyond that, you really don't want to touch him that much. PvP, he's gooder. He's better in the early game. Falls off very hard in the late game. If I had my option and I wasn't going purely by the data this time, I would probably bump him down to 7th, 8th, or 9th, probably behind like Ithaca. Penny, though, is another really good hero. You'll notice there's a ton of Fortress heroes at the top here. They are extremely strong and extremely good. Penny is probably one of the best picks you could go for because she has easier copy acquisition than Eloise, Holmes Young, Tix, anybody else on the list, because you can get her in the guild shop and you can get her in the altar shop. So Penny is probably overall, as far as like the budget version free to play, would be the easiest to build. She absolutely kills it in Sealand. However, she doesn't do it anywhere near as easy as any of the other heroes in the 9 category. I probably should have bumped her down 8. Is what it is. She does really great in Aspen Dungeon. She's one of the 2 heroes that can get you a very easy death 100 with her with a Kiss of Ghost. But again, she does fall off in the late game. She is not a tenant for any Transcendence heroes. Eventually, you might want to swap her out. Our plan on our team is we built her second. Eventually, we're going to swap her into a Shia to then turn into a Sword Flash Shia. So she's fodder, more or less, but is what it is. Very close behind her is going to be Nosuke. Now, Nosuke is one of my favorite heroes still. His shields aren't as strong as they used to be, but he still does a lot of work in the early game, and he's one of the probably the best early game boss damage dealers because of his survivability with his shields. But he does suffer in places like Tower. He can beat the Mim waves, at least the first 1 or 2 Mim waves. But beyond that, he doesn't do that great because he needs to have shields, and usually in the early game, you don't have any other supporters around you to let him keep his shield going, so that does suffer. The next up on the list is Ithaca. So Ithaca is probably one of the most useful heroes, probably the top 3 useful heroes with like Eloise and Holmes Young on this list, all the way from the early game to the late game. She will be the best PvE damage dealer you have on your account for arc bosses, guild bosses, broken spaces. She's just most broken PvE boss fight damage dealer. She's pretty good with solo Sealand 20, but she does require like Tixes and maybe an artifact or 2. She does do decently in Aspen Dungeon. She can get you to like death 50. I have seen people get her to death 100. It is a little tricky. Beyond that, though, she really suffers in PvP. She doesn't perform well there. And of course, she's not really used at all past Sealand 20 in the Shadow faction. She is a tenant for a Transcendence hero, so she does get a little bonus there. But beyond that, not really. Now, the first Abyss hero on this list is Delacium. Delacium, again, you'll notice we organized this entire list based on Sealand 20 rankings, because those are the ones you really want to be going for first. We have a couple heroes that fall into the same category. Delacium, Cthulhu, and Waldeck. They're all pretty much the same quality level in all the different game modes that they're used in, with the exception that Delacium pairs with Ithaca so well for PvE boss fight damage. Beyond that, not really that many uses for Delacium. He's used in a ton of cheese teams, but those cheese teams are now gone. PvP, he's really bad. So you probably don't really want to build Delacium, Cthulhu, or Waldeck with long-term plans, even Morax either, because you'll notice all 4 of them, their numbers are very similar to each other. You probably don't want to build them, but you need to build one of them to get to Sealand 20 to then let Queen take over, Scarlet Queen Halora, and clear out 21+. So you're going to have to build one of them. Choose which one you want, but I would not make any of them your first E5 hero. Next up is Garuda. Garuda is by far the easiest hero to build because you get 5 copies just from the chapter systems for leveling up your account and doing certain things. She's very good in early game boss fights too. Very good damage, very good survivability because as your allies die, she'll get heals and more damage. She does do okay in Aspen Dungeon, but it's really not that great, along with those other kind of those other Abyss heroes that were around her. PvP, she's really good in the early game, but then falls off very hard in the late game. She's an easy one to build, but her Sealand 20 is not that easy to accomplish. And when we're talking about first heroes to build, you want to talk about clearing one of every Sealand, so you're going to need one of every hero. She's the pick for Forest, let's be honest. There's nobody else besides Garuda you want to clear Sealand 20 for Forest, but you don't really want to make her your first E5, maybe like 3rd or 4th in my opinion, 2nd at the very earliest, but definitely not first. But she does have value if you have to. She's not a Transcendence Tendant, so you're not going to keep her for the long run. You have to remember things like that. And then we also have Horus in a very similar situation to Garuda. Easy to get Horus copies mostly. Very easy Sealand 20, but beyond that, he's really not that great. He'll do okay against guild bosses. He's absolutely abysmal in PvP compared to anybody else on this list. So just keep that in mind. If you're thinking about Horus, maybe not. So we talked about Cthulhu, Waldeck, and Mirax. They're all pretty much the same, except Waldeck and Mirax will get you to death 50 in Aspen Dungeon compared to the other ones. They do have a little bit harder time in solo Sealand 20, but not bad. Next up on the list is Rogan, though. So Rogan is the only other forest hero on this list, and you probably shouldn't build him as the first E5 hero. I know MK did a test series with him once, and it wasn't that impressive. But the one thing with Rogan is eventually he can get it done solo Sealand 20, especially if you built a second one too for supporting in Vortex and all those other places. He does really good. As a first E5, definitely not, but you'll notice his late game scores are way up there. His early mid game scores are high because he's a supporter and he's going to help support a lot of different game modes, but he's not going to get you that solo Sealand 20. If anything, I would build the Garuda, clear solo Sealand 20, and then swap into a Rogan after that. Natasha's on this list. Unimax is on this list. Neither one of them are really great at anything, but they can get solo Sealand 20 done. It's just not that easy. Overall usefulness is very bad. Natasha's actually now a tenant. I need to fix that little issue on this list. That'll give her a little bump up, but nothing really important. Unimax, just like Tower, he does good in Aspen Dungeon, and then solo Sealand he can do, but it's very difficult. Beyond that, really not useful. And then the last one on this list I want to mention is Shia. So Shia can in fact get solo Sealand 20 done, but she's not a first hero you want to build. If you were to build her 4th or 5th on your account, it would be pretty solid to use her as your fortress pick. If you're not going to use Holmes Young, Penny, and Nosuke, you got lots of options in the fortress, but she can get it done. Once you get solo Sealand 20 done, you can then immediately swap her over into a Sword Flash. So that is an option, but hopefully this helps you guys out. Make sure you guys are looking at every column on this list, every single one of them, because it's even giving you all the data of, yes, this hero might be really good in the early game, but overall they're not that great, or really good in the early game and mid game, bad in the late game with a decent overall score. So let me know what you guys think. Again, I don't know if I'm going to post a link in the description with the actual image file of this, because it's really hard to get what I'm going for with this list without listening to me explain it. So hopefully you guys enjoy this one. Hopefully it gives you a little bit of insight on how useful they are in different game modes. I'll see you guys next time.